Today to see if I still feel.
Johnny Cash lived life on his own terms, a legend forged in fire, faith, and raw emotion. But in his final days, the stage lights faded, and his world became one of solitude, reflection, and an unbreakable bond with music. With over 90 million records sold, a voice that defined generations, and the iconic Man in Black legacy, Cash's journey was unparalleled. Yet, as time wore on, loss and illness tested the strength of the man who had once seemed invincible. This is the story of Johnny Cash's last days, a time of pain, resilience, and unwavering devotion to his art. Even as his body weakened, his soul burned brighter than ever, leaving behind a final masterpiece that would etch his name into eternity. What does a legend do when the end is near? He sings, he remembers, he endures. This is Johnny Cash in his final chapter. Johnny Cash was never meant for an ordinary life. Born in the dirt and struggle of the Great Depression, he grew up in the cotton fields of Arkansas, where hard work and hardship shaped his soul. Music became his escape, his salvation, and soon his destiny. With a voice like thunder rolling across the plains, Cash sang the songs of the working man, the outlaws, and the broken-hearted. His lyrics were poetry wrapped in grit, tales of love, redemption, and rebellion. He wasn't just a singer, he was a storyteller, a voice for the lost and weary. Fame found him in the 1950s, as his sound carved a place between country, rock, and folk. Hits like I Walked the Line and Folsom Prison Blues turned him into an icon, a man whose music could shake a prison wall or bring tears to a crowded arena. He was magnetic, raw, and real, never polished, never perfect, but always unforgettable. But the road to greatness came with a cost. Temptation followed him, and addiction became his shadow. The pills and the reckless choices, the self-destruction, it all nearly took him under. He became the outlaw in his own songs, a man running from himself. The world saw the legend, but inside Johnny Cash was unraveling. Then came June. June Carter was more than just a fellow musician. She was his lifeline. Their love was forged in music, tested by turmoil, and bound by something greater than either of them. She saw past the darkness, past the mistakes, and into the man he could be. She pulled him back from the edge, helped him find faith again, and stood beside him as he rebuilt himself from the ashes of his own destruction. With her by his side, Cash found redemption, not just in music, but in life. He sobered up, found God, and poured his soul into his art like never before. The Man in Black became more than just a singer. He became a symbol of resilience, of second chances, of standing for something greater than himself. But even as the years passed and his body grew weaker, that fire inside him never dimmed. Through decades of triumph and hardship, Johnny Cash remained what he had always been: a fighter, a storyteller, a legend. And in his final days, as time ran short, he would prove once again that the Man in Black never backed down. Not from pain, not from loss, not even from the end itself. By 2003, Johnny Cash had walked through fire and come out the other side. He had conquered addiction, defied the odds, and stood tall through decades of triumph and turmoil. But nothing could prepare him for what came next. On May 15, 2003, the love of his life, June Carter Cash, took her final breath. The woman who had saved him, the one who had given him strength when he had none left, was gone. And with her, a part of Johnny Cash vanished too. For 50 years, she had been his anchor, his guiding light, her laughter, her kindness, her unwavering belief in him. June was more than his wife. She was his salvation. And now, without her, he was adrift. The world saw a man who had always been larger than life. But those closest to him saw the weight of grief sinking deep into his bones. His hands trembled. His voice, once strong and steady, grew fragile. He barely ate, barely slept. He sat in the quiet of their home, surrounded by memories that refused to fade. Her voice still echoed in the hallways. Her scent lingered in the air. He was haunted, not by regret, but by love, by the unbearable emptiness of losing the one person who had ever truly understood him. In one of his last interviews, his voice cracked as he spoke. "The pain of her absence is unbearable, but I have music to keep me company." And so, he turned to the only thing he had left, his songs. With his body failing and his heart broken, he stepped into the studio, determined to record while he still could. Every note, every lyric carried the weight of a lifetime. He sang with sorrow, with reverence, with the kind of depth that only comes from knowing the end is near. Then came Hurt, Originally written by Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, Cash took the song and made it his own. It was a confession, a reckoning, a man looking back on his life, his regrets, his mistakes, and his love. With every strained syllable, he bared his soul. The world watched, stunned, as the music video for Hurt was released. A frail Johnny Cash sat at a table, surrounded by relics of his past. Old film reels flickered with images of his youth, of June, of the life he had built, and the time that had slipped away. It was raw, it was devastating, it was beautiful. Trent Reznor himself admitted, "That song doesn't belong to me anymore, it belongs to Johnny Cash." His family and friends saw the change in him. He had always been strong, always defied the odds, but now he was tired. He had lived a life fuller than most could ever dream. But without June, the fight was slipping from his spirit. Johnny Cash wasn't afraid of death. He had faced it too many times, looked it straight in the eye and walked away. But now, with the love of his life waiting on the other side, he knew his time was coming. The man in black had lost his queen, and soon he would join her. In his final months, Johnny Cash lived in quiet solitude at his home in Hendersonville, Tennessee. The house, filled with decades of memories, became both his sanctuary and his prison. Once it had echoed with music, laughter, and June's presence. Now it was silent, except for the sound of his own breath and the music he refused to stop making. His body was failing him. Diabetic neuropathy had stolen his strength, leaving him bound to a wheelchair. His hands, once steady enough to strum his guitar for hours, shook with every movement. His eyesight was fading, the world around him growing dimmer by the day. And yet, despite the pain, despite the loss, Johnny Cash still had work to do. Every morning he rose before the sun, the way he always had. He moved slowly now, every step a battle, but he never let it stop him. The first thing he reached for wasn't a guitar, it was his Bible. He would sit by the window, flipping through the worn pages, absorbing every word. Faith had always been his foundation, but now, in these final days, it was his lifeline. After hours of reading, he turned to his second ritual, letters. He wrote to his children, his grandchildren, old friends, bandmates, and the people who had shaped his journey. He poured out his thoughts, his gratitude, his memories. Some letters were filled with love, others with regret, but each one carried the weight of a man who knew his time was running out. Then the music called to him. The studio had become his sanctuary, the one place where he still felt alive. Even when his voice cracked, when the notes didn't come as easily as they once did, he refused to stop. Every song was a farewell. He wanted the raw, unfiltered truth of Johnny Cash's voice. Together, they created the American Recordings series, a stripped-down, intimate collection of songs that reintroduced Cash to a new generation. No frills, no distractions, just a man, his voice, and his stories. But it was the fourth album in the series, American 4, The Man Comes Around. That would become his final masterpiece. Among its tracks was a song that no one expected him to record, Hurt. Originally written by Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, a song born in the industrial darkness of the 1990s, transformed into a haunting farewell in the hands of Johnny Cash. When he stepped into the booth to record it, his body was failing him, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. His voice cracked under the weight of the lyrics, but he sang them anyway, knowing this was more than just another song. This was his confession, his reckoning, his last great act of storytelling. The music video became something else entirely, a funeral before the funeral. Cash sat at a table, surrounded by the remnants of his life. Gold records, old photographs, and faded memories. His hands trembled as he poured wine, a quiet reminder that time had taken its toll. Footage of his younger days flashed across the screen, moments of triumph and regret playing out like a lifetime unraveling in front of him. His body was frail, his steps unsteady. But the fire that had carried him through a lifetime of music still burned inside him. It was home, a place filled with history, tradition, and love, and memories of the woman he loved. He finished the song, let the last chord linger in the air, then looked out at the crowd. There was no grand farewell, no long speech, just a moment, a final look, a silent acknowledgement that this was the end. Then he gave a nod, one last gesture of gratitude, and left the stage. No encore, no final bow, just a man who had given everything. Sure, if you're enjoying this video, please consider like, subscribe, and hitting the bell icon to stay updated with more content like this in the future.